Brothers and sisters, whether you eat or drink, whatever you do everything for the glory of God. St. Paul's words to begin our second reading. These words are echoed in the first line of the St. Michael Parish Mission. Place God first in all things. On this last Sunday before we enter into Lent, a day which many will only celebrate as Valentine's Day and not as the Lord's Day, I want to tell you a different kind of love story. I want to transport you from snowy Thurston County to the warm shores of one of the Hawaiian Islands. As I begin, I want to acknowledge three people who are very influential in this homily. The first is Sister Barbara Jean LaRochelle, a member of the Carmelite cloistered community in Baltimore, Maryland. She was my spiritual director during the year I studied for my master's in pastoral counseling and spirituality. She is a no-nonsense, compassionate, African-American spiritual heavyweight who transformed my spiritual life. The second is Father Joe Pellegrino, a priest in Florida, who inspired this homily. And the third is a parishioner who gave me a booklet about Father Damien de Worcester after visiting Molokai. I'm grateful to each of them. Because of Sister Barbara Jean, I have spent the first hour and a half to 2 hours of my day in some form of prayer, spiritual reading, and reflection since 1979. On my windowsill that looks into the Adoration Chapel, I have pictures of various saints to whom I turn in prayer on behalf of others and for myself. One of them is Father Damien in his last stages of leprosy. Here is his story. Father Damien was a missionary priest from Belgium who came to the Big Island of Hawaii in 1864 to serve the needs of the local church. On one of the smaller islands, Molokai, there is a small windswept peninsula named Kalaupapa, which abuts the steep cliffs of the island. This would become the leper colony for the islands. Up until about 100 years ago, with the advent of sulfides, leprosy was a feared disease and treated with a form of suspicion and superstition. Leprosy was a terrible-looking disease with sores throughout the body and blockages in the circulatory system, resulting in parts of the body deteriorating. In Hawaii, and as in other places throughout the world, hospitals would often not treat lepers. Instead, the lepers were forced to live in colonies with laws separating them from society, similar to those laws that we heard from the book of Leviticus in our first reading. Beginning in January 1866, the Hawaii Health Department began to isolate lepers on the peninsula of Kalaupapa without any assistance. They transported them by ships, threw them off to swim to shore. Many died, and they were left to fend for themselves. It was chaos. There was no medicine, no doctors, no shelters, no blankets, nothing but the weather beating on the exposed peninsula. In 1873, the Bishop of Honolulu heard that there were 7 to 10 Catholics among the 300 lepers on Molokai. Wanting to minister to their needs, he found 4 priests who would be willing to spend time on the island on a rotating basis. Father Damien would be the first. The bishop told Father Damien that he was to keep his distance from the lepers. He was not to anoint them or bury them. He was not to hear confessions except from afar. He could not give them Holy Communion on the tongue. He was not to have any personal contact with the lepers, for he did not want Father Damien to contact leprosy and die. When Father Damien arrived in 1873, he was understandably anxious and fearful. He spent his first night under a tree for fear of being too close to the lepers. Yet quickly, he realized that they were people, human beings, and not merely a disease. Father Damien was a very practical person and son of a carpenter. He began to build shelters for the lepers. Eventually, he built the church and began celebrating Mass. He was shocked to find that over 100 people wanting to pray with him every Sunday, even though there were less than 10 Catholics on the island. He simply showed Christ's love to them, and they responded. Father Damien shortly informed the bishop that he wanted to stay and minister to the needs of the people. The bishop agreed. Over the years, he built more and more shelters, a water system, and turned Kalaupapa into a functioning community. He planted over 1,000 trees to protect the people from the elements. He expanded the church and prayed for the people and with the people. Lepers of all faiths and no faith went to Mass. They said, "He holds our hands when we die." Father Damien wrote to organizations around the world to provide help. He received shipments of blankets and food and everyday supplies that were so incredibly valuable. One leper wrote, "Today is the happiest day of my life. Today I have received my blanket. It is my blanket. I will be buried in it. Today I have hope and joy, for I have experienced God's love." Father Damien learned how to clean and bandage sores, apply ointments, and prescribe medicines. Damien brought food and drink to those who were most sick. He ate with them. He cleansed and dressed their wounds. He attended to their spiritual needs while they were alive. And Father Damien took care of their bodies after they died, putting them in a coffin that he helped to build and burying them in the graves that he helped to dig. Although leprosy is not as contagious as feared, Father Damien did contract leprosy in 1885, probably because he did not pay much attention to caring for his own health. In November of 1887, Sister Marianne Cope arrived with a group of Franciscan sisters to assist Father Damien carry on his work. 2 years later, by mid-February, Father Damien's condition had worsened. He coughed a great deal and suffered from violent bouts of diarrhea. Painful sores broke out all over his hands, and the light caused him severe pain. When new ulcers appeared on the joints of his fingers, Father Damien could no longer celebrate Mass. The disease, which had invaded his windpipe, reduced his voice to a rough whisper and prevented him from sleeping more than an hour or two at a time. On April 2nd, 1889, Father Damien received extreme-unction, the sacrament of the sick, and whispered, "How good God is, to have made me live long enough to see at this moment 2 priests at my side and the Franciscan sisters at the settlement. I am no longer necessary. I am going to heaven." He died 2 weeks later on April 15th, 1889, Monday of Holy Week, 26 years after he first arrived. He was buried next to the church he helped build. He was canonized by Pope Benedict XVI in 2009, and Sister Marianne Cope was canonized by Pope Benedict XVI in 2012. A leper came to Jesus and, kneeling down, begged him and said, "If you wish, you can make me clean." Moved with pity, Jesus stretched out his hand, touched him, and said, "I do will it. Be made clean." Who are the outcasts in our day? Who are those that society shuns, are afraid of, who are deprived of human dignity and human rights? As I pondered those questions, my list grew longer and longer. There is one group, though, that I want to lift up today. They are the most vulnerable and do not have a voice to advocate for themselves. They are the children in the wombs of their mothers. Since 1973, when the Supreme Court decisions of Roe v. Wade and Doe v. Bolton occurred, the lives of more than 60 million preborn children have been ended by abortion in the United States. That is more than the present number of American citizens 65 years and older. That is roughly half the number of people worldwide who died in all the wars of the 20th century. As Pope Francis wrote in Gaudete et Exsultate, defense of the innocent unborn needs to be clear, firm, and passionate, for at stake is the dignity of a human life, which is always sacred. In his last visit to the United States, Pope St. John Paul II summoned Catholics to be unconditionally pro-life. And he said these words, "Eradicate every form of racism as a part of your wholehearted and essential commitment to life." We have much work to do as a nation and as a church. The United States Council of Catholic Bishops, in their statement on the inauguration of President Biden, wrote, I quote, "In the most recent Forming Consciences for Faithful Citizenship, we American bishops addressed a wide range of concerns. Among them, abortion, euthanasia, the death penalty, immigration, racism, poverty, care for the environment, criminal justice reform, economic development, and international peace." They continued, "The continued injustice of abortion remains the preeminent priority." Preeminent does not mean only. It is a matter of social justice. We cannot ignore the reality that abortion rates are higher among the poor and minorities, and that the procedure is regularly used to eliminate children who would be born with disabilities. Abortion remains the preeminent priority of the church, unquote. I ask that you please give special attention to the Prepares pamphlet in the bulletin on your way out, or on the last page of the digital edition. Prepares is a pregnancy and parenting support initiative of the 3 dioceses in Washington State. It provides care from pregnancy to the child's 5th birthday to mothers and fathers who choose life and are in need. Together with our local pregnancy aid ministry here at the parish, we want to encourage mothers and fathers to choose life, no matter their faith belief. Please help us to share and to live God's love story with the human race and with every person from the moment of conception until the moment of natural death.